Welcome to the fourth class of this fresh start in 3D modeling with special focus on products. In previous classes, here's what we have covered. In class 1, we learned some fundamentals about 3D design. We went through the Cinema4D interface. We learned some important modeling tools and we understood how subdivisions work. In class 2, we learned how to model 3D products, starting with cylinders as our primitives. We also practiced by modeling 4 different products with their detailed covers. In class 3, we learned how to create holes and extrude new shapes from an existing mesh. In this class, we'll learn how to model a complete kettle by applying lessons we've learned from previous classes. There are several ways you can take part in this series and also support the series and the channel at large. First, you can kindly subscribe to the channel to get more classes and to get notified for subsequent series and 3D content. And you can also join my 3D community on Telegram for more conversations, tips, challenges, resource sharing, and growth opportunities. Then you can also grab the Fresh Start bundle of clay image references. It consists of over 25 clay product references to help you practice and model more products after you take part in this training. Also, if you're into NFTs, you can patronize my Vogbot NFT project on OpenSea that has a crazy utility where I create a free animated fashion NFT for every piece sold. So let's quickly set our scene up on Cinema 4D. So I'll divide our viewport. I'll go to panel here. Under arrangement, I'll select 2 views side by side. So then I'll change the camera here to front. Then to add our image reference, I'll go to options, configure, and under back, I'll click these 3 dots to load our image. So I'll select the kettle here. So I'll change the alpha mode to normal so that becomes transparent. Then I'll drag this above the grid line by adjusting the offset here. Let's go ahead to change the transparency to 78%. So let's bring a cylinder in. So I'll first place the cylinder this way. For this, because I'll be creating detail here, I want more segments so that I'll be able to extrude the circle at this area here. So for this, I can use 22 segments. So if I look at my lines there, this area should be enough for me to extrude the mouth of this kettle. So let's work with 22 segments. So I'll hit C on my keyboard to make that editable. Now hit U and O to optimize the mesh so that the caps are properly connected. So first, let's shape the base mesh of this kettle without this detail and also shape these handles here. So I'll go to my polygon mode. I'll use my loop selection tool to select this loop here. And I can just extrude this to this point and scale it uniformly. So I'm not scaling this on a particular axis. I'm scaling it uniformly by clicking outside the gizmo. So I'll just extrude this one more time here. Then I can scale this a little bit. Now before I delete these polygons, I want to separate this polygon here and use it to create the cover. So I want to take these polygons but use it as a separate object to now extrude this cover. So to do that, you can just right click and then you can click split here. So that will convert our polygon selection to a separate object. So here you find a new object we've just created. So let's name this body and let's name this new object cover. So for now, just hide this new cover we've created. Then on the body, I'll delete these polygons here. Then let's go back to the cover and bring that in. So I'll hit Ctrl A on my keyboard to select all the polygons. Then I'll just drag this down. So we'll start the extrusion from inside the kettle. So I'll just use my move tool. I'll hold Ctrl and I'll just duplicate this to this point here. Then I'll scale this inwards a little here. Then I'll just continue extruding and shaping this properly. So I'm holding Ctrl and my move tool to extrude it, and I'm using my scale tool to scale this uniformly. So to create this stop handle here, let's do the same thing we did for this cover. So with this polygon selected, I'll right click and then I'll select split here. So we can rename this to cover 2. So for the former cover, we won't delete the top. We'll leave that to allow that object continue there. And also for this cover, we'll use a different extrude method. So I'll hit Ctrl A. So we want to create a cap when we extrude this. So let me demonstrate this properly. If I just solo this object here, if I use this extrude tool and take this up, you see that it doesn't create any cap at the base. But for this handle, we want it to create a cap here. So let's use our extrude tool. So if I hit D on my keyboard, I'll make sure I check create caps here. Then I can just extrude that upwards. So I'll bring our other objects back by turning the solo off. And I'll collapse our view back here. So as this is extruded with caps, we can then continue extruding with our move tool. So I'll scale this inwards here. And I can now extrude with this. So I extrude this way also. So we can stop here when we have this, and we can just insert the face here and then just add this for supporting edges. So here's what we have. So let's create this detail over here. So I'll select the body. So these are the faces I want to work with. So from the techniques we learned earlier, I'll be using the beveling mode. So I'll go to my edge mode, then I'll add a loop cut here at the top, then I'll add another loop cut here at the base. Then I'll add another one at the center of this cut I just made. And I'll click these three lines to centralize that, or I can come here and just type 50%. So now let's go to our point mode. Select this point here, then hit M and S to bring our bevel tool. So here we can just reset the values and make sure nothing is beveled already. So I'll just left click and drag to bevel this way first. Then I'll add one subdivision here and I'll change this depth to -100% so I get this perfect circle shape. So let's join these points for better topology. So I'll bring my line cut tool M and K. Then I'll just left click here and here. Then I'll hit escape when I'm done. I'll make another cut here and I'll make another cut in these other areas. So before I extrude this, let's adjust this point here and here to make sure it helps this circle flow properly. So I'll select this point, then I'll select my slide tool, M and O. Then I'll just slide this over to this area here. Then I can also left click and drag this over to this area here. When I'm done, I can select all these faces. I'll use my loop selection tool. Then I can also scale this uniformly. So now we're ready to extrude this circle. So I'll go to my move tool, then I'll just extrude this once first. So I just want to flatten this out on this area. So to do that, let's use our scale tool. So I'll hit T to bring our scale tool. Then I'll just scale this down to 0 on the x-axis. So you can hold shift to make sure that scales down to 0. So you see now that is flat. So the next thing is for us to shape and extrude around this area here. So I can scale this a little bit. Then I'll just extrude this way. I'll rotate this. Now scale this. Then I want to make sure my gizmo aligns with our rotation. So I'll enable the axis tool here so I can adjust only the gizmo. So I'll hit R to just rotate the gizmo alone. And when I'm done with that rotation, I'll disable my axis tool here. And doing that, make sure you're in your local coordinate system. And just keep extruding and shaping this object. So when I'm done with that, I can come here and just delete these faces. So let's isolate only this kettle for now. So I'll go here and then hit viewport solo single. At the top here, I want to create an interesting detail. So I'll go to my edge mode. I'll select this loop here. Then I can just drag this down a little. Maybe scale this upwards this way. Then here, I can add one more loop cut. Select that loop cut. And I'll just hit T to scale this outwards this way. So let's add some thickness to this mesh. So I'll go to my polygon mode. Let's expand this view. So I'll hit Ctrl A on my keyboard to select all the polygons. Now hit D to bring my extrude tool. Make sure create caps is selected. Then I'll just extrude this inwards this way. So I can come here and still change our offset. So I can just leave this at -4. So for these edges here, I make sure we scale this down to 0. So I'll go to our axis mode and I'll just rotate the axis alone to match the rotation of this our kettle here. So once I'm done with that, I'll disable the axis. Then I'll just hit T and scale this down to 0. So I can hold shift to make sure that's scaled down to 0. So now I have that flattened out. So at the base of the kettle, let's just add a loop cut here. We can also add a loop cut here. Then we can come here to add a loop cut so that this area will be defined when we subdivide it. Then here also, let's add loop cuts here and also add loop cuts here. So now let's subdivide this to see what we have. So I'll add the subdivision surface. I'll expand this view here. And this is what we should have. So I can break this panel down back. So let's bring our other objects back in. So I'll turn this solo off. I can expand this view for now. I'll select this cover. I'll add the subdivision surface. So remember, I'm holding Alt before I select the subdivision surface to make this automatically the child of the subdivision surface. Then I'll select this cover also and add the subdivision surface. So for this, let's go to polygon mode. So without soloing this object, I can just select the loop here. So I'll use UL to select the loop. And I just want to drag it downwards to this point. Then I'll add a loop cut right at this point here. So if I turn that subdivision back on, that should stick to the body. So the final thing we'll be creating is this handle, and we'll also be shaping a cylinder around this area and then splitting some parts to create this top handle. So let's do that. I'll just expand this view so that we can see this properly. So I'll get a cylinder, and for this we can work it as low as 10 segments. I'll take the cylinder to start from this area here, rotate this. I can collapse my view to see what I have here. So I'll hit C to make this editable, then I'll hit U and O to optimize the mesh. So I'll select the polygons here using my loop selection tool. I'll just start extruding, scaling and adjusting this. So again, I'll go to my axis mode, then I'll just rotate only the axis to match my rotation. So I'll uncheck the axis mode here. The shortcut for that is to hit L on your keyboard. So now we can start rotating and our axis will flow with our rotation. So for this area, don't bother about the top angle here. So just make sure you place the loops at this point that I'm placing them. So I'll add the subdivision surface temporarily for this so that I can shape these areas to touch the mesh. So I'll add the subdivision surface here. So what we'll do is I'll select these loops here to form this top handle. So I'll hit U and L on my keyboard, then I'll select this loop. I'll hold Shift to add these selections here. So I'll right click and then I'll select split. So right now, if you have two objects placed in your subdivision surface this way, you see that it only smoothens this original mesh here. So to correct that, we'll just group this. So I'll hit Alt G on my keyboard to add that into a null. And you see the smoothness now applies to this other object. So let's disable the subdivision surface for now and then select this new cylinder we've created here. Let's label them. So let's call this top handle and let's call this handle. So it's this top handle we want to shape here. So here, a tool I can use for selection is my rectangular selection tool. So if I go here and open these options, I can select my rectangular selection tool. Then I'll just draw a box over here and select all the edges that fall within that selection. Of course, only select visible elements is unchecked. So I'll scale that outwards this way. Then you can hit 0 as the shortcut for your rectangular selection tool. So I'll hit 0 here and I'll select this loop. Then I will expand this to match the reference. I'll hit 0 here and I'll expand this to actually be larger than the reference. Then I'll add loop cuts here as supporting edges and add loop cuts here also as supporting edges. So we need to ensure these caps are filled. So let's solo this object. So I'll go to viewport solo single here. So to do this, right click and then select close polygon hole. Then you just go over the hole you want to close and then you left click there. We'll go over to this hole and we also left click here. So here, let's just connect some of these points so that we'll have a smooth topology at this area. So I'll go to my point mode, I'll select my line cut tool with M and K. I'll select this at this top here. I'll select this way, select this way. And I can actually stop here, or I can just select this too also. So let's do that for the other area. So I'll select all these faces, make sure this select visible elements is checked because I want to select only what I can see here. Then I'll hit I to insert those faces this way just to create supporting edges. I'll do that also for this area. So let's pull this solo off and we can expand this view to see what we have. So if we put our subdivision surface back on, this is how the handle should look. So something you might want to correct as you proceed is where this gizmo starts when you select the entire object. So naturally it's meant to start from the center of this object, but because we took this handle from this point, it has marked that as the origin of this object. Also for the handle, it has also marked that area as the origin for the object. So you can correct this for any mesh this way. First, optimize the mesh, so hit U and O. So that will also delete any point we don't need. So I'll also optimize this other point here, U and O. So you can go over here to mesh, another axis center. So you can select center axis 2. So if you want to know what this is centering your axis to, you can click on the axis center here. Then you see the options. It is set to all points by default. So you can either execute this here. And for this other object, let's go to mesh, axis center. You can just click center axis 2. Then you can change the coordinate system to world. Thank you for joining this class. In our next class, we'll learn how to model from flat surfaces, and we'll also learn how to use symmetry or mirror tools. And we'll be modeling this headset for practice. So ensure you subscribe, and remember you can support this initiative by grabbing the product reference bundle in the description below, and you can also support by getting a Vogbot NFT on OpenSea, where you also get a free animated fashion NFT for every piece bought. All this information can be found in the description below.